Senator from Illinois.
Ask consent the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
And to speak as if in morning business.
No objection.
Mr. President, there are many issues which come before the Senate, and some are simple and some are complex. The issue which I am going to speak to today is one which you're personally aware of as the Senator from West Virginia, and one that more and more members are becoming aware of, and it's the question of interchange fees or swipe fees. And for those who don't follow this closely, every time you use a credit card or a debit card in the United States of America, the retailer or merchant that you do business with pays a fee to the bank that issued the card. The fee is established by the major credit card networks, Visa and MasterCard. They tell the banks how much they'll receive each time a customer uses this card. And what it comes down to is that the fee that is being charged, the debit card fee, has become a subject of controversy. Let's go back in history a little bit. I can still remember when people used checks, and some still do, but not as frequently. Now we use the plastic form of a checking account. Instead of writing out a check and pushing it through the banking system and for a few cents watching it be processed, we use a debit card. And a debit card draws money directly out of our checking account to the merchant we're doing business with. So the debit card has, in fact, in large measure, replaced checks. In many instances, replaced cash, as more and more people are using plastic for transactions. And so I started hearing from merchants and retailers all around the United States about the fee that was being charged for debit card transactions. Now, debit card transactions are different than credit card transactions in this respect. When I use my credit card, I'm going to be billed each month for what I put on my credit card. There is a collection issue. Will Durbin actually make his monthly payment? Will he make it on time? Is he able to make the payment? And there's a question about whether or not this is going to be processed. So there's, I guess, an uncertainty involved in credit card transactions, and much less so when it comes to debit card transactions, because that money's coming directly out of your checking account to your merchant. So in terms of risk, there is greater risk with a credit card than there is with a debit card. Nevertheless, over the years, what we've seen is the swipe fee or fee charged to the merchant for the use of a debit card keeps going up, up, and up. And people would say, well, why don't the merchants and retailers bargain with Visa, MasterCard, and the banks to make sure that they don't have to pay an increasingly large fee every time a person uses a debit card? And the answer is they have no power to bargain at all. Not at all. And so the retailer, the merchant, ends up accepting the debit card, swiping the debit card, paying for the transaction, and then paying a fee, to the point where you look and ask, well, how much of a fee is it? The average debit card fee found by the recent study of the Federal Reserve is about 40 cents a transaction. 40 cents may not sound like much if you're buying a television, or of course it's going to be a percentage, but think about 40 cents of the person standing in front of you at line at the airport buying a package of bubble gum. That 40 cents is all the profit that that retailer could ever expect, and it's going right out the window. In fact, they're losing money on the transaction because of the debit card. So for years, retailers and merchants, restaurants, convenience stores, hotels, charities, universities went to Visa and MasterCard and said, you can't keep just raising this fee. It's not fair to us. You're not justifying it in terms of your cost of doing business, and we're paying more and more and more out of each transaction. even though your cost is not going up. And basically, Visa and MasterCard told them, go take a hike. We're going to charge what we want to charge. Take it or leave it, buddy. If you don't want to take plastic, that's your business. Try to do business without it. Well, you can't. And so retailers and merchants were on the losing end of this conversation. So they came to me and said, is there a way to do a study on this issue and determine what's fair? So a few years ago, I joined with Senator Bond of Missouri, and the two of us on credit card reform bill asked for a study. Well, it turned out the banking industry didn't want any study at all. They killed our request for a study and told people, all the people in the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, vote against even a study of the swipe fee, the debit card interchange fee. So we ended up empty-handed. And the day came last year when we revisited the issue. This time I came to the floor with an amendment and said, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to give to the Federal Reserve the power to promulgate a rule which says that the fee charged for the use of a debit card is going to be reasonable and proportional to the costs incurred by the bank in processing this transaction. And we're going to put in a factor here for fraud. If there's something they need to add to take care of fraud, add it in. We went a step further. We said this is not going to apply to every bank and credit union that issues a debit card. We are going to exempt the overwhelming majority of community banks and credit unions across America. Mr. President, there are about 15,000 community banks, I should say, banks and credit unions across the United States, 15,000. So we said if your bank or credit union has a valuation of less than $10 billion, you're not covered by this law at all. You're exempt. At the end of the day, it meant that about 100 banks across America were subject to this new law and 3 credit unions. All the rest are exempt. So you say, well, Durbin, if you exempted all these banks, almost 15,000 of them, and you only affected about 100 of them, how can this have any impact? Well, it turns out that of the largest banks in America, 3 of the big ones, that would be Chase, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America, they really comprise over half of all the debit card transactions in the country. Some say even more, 60% or even more. So by just making this a law that applies to the largest banks, we're affecting the majority of debit card transactions, and we're establishing a reasonable and proportional fee for what the transaction is. So the retailer and merchant, the person running the mom-and-pop store or the person running a big box store, is going to get fair treatment in terms of how much is charged. So you say to yourself, well, how much are they charging now? The Federal Reserve estimates they're charging about 40 cents a transaction, and the actual cost to the bank and the credit card company is about 10 cents. They're charging 4 times as much as they should on each transaction. How much money is it worth to the banks? The estimates range from $1.3 to $1.7 billion a month. A month. Now, these banks, the big banks that I'm addressing with this law, they're not having little collections outside the bank to keep themselves in business. They are bringing in quite a bit of money. They're very profitable. And to say that they should have a reasonable charge for retailers and merchants across America, small businesses and large businesses alike, I don't think is unreasonable. And remember, we exempted the community banks. We exempted the credit unions. It's only the big ones that are going to be affected by this. Well, you would think that I had done the worst thing in the world to these banks and credit card companies. They have unleashed, with the greatest fury you can possibly put together on Wall Street, this attack against the Durbin Amendment. They're sending out letters, Chase is, to all the people who have debit card accounts and credit card accounts and saying, if this Durbin Amendment goes through, we're going to charge extra fees here and extra fees there. Well, at the end of the day, that's the threat we always hear from them. And the fact of the matter is, since they are virtual monopolies in their business, They are increasing their fee charges regularly, and people across America know it. Every time we put in a reform, they race to raise their interest rates and race to raise their penalties. They give you these free checking accounts loaded up with penalties if you stumble and don't pay on the exact day or whatever it happens to be. And so it's become quite a battle. It's a battle between Visa, MasterCard, and the biggest banks in America versus the retailers and merchants of America. And they're both engaged. Now, the retailers and merchants really can't hold a candle to the big banks and credit card companies when it comes to their investment in this fight. But they're trying valiantly, and we are organizing small businesses across the United States, in Illinois, West Virginia, all over the place, to step up and say, come on, this is an important part of business. Now, I ran into one of my colleagues on the floor here, and she said, you know, what I'm worried about is even if you reduce the fee charged to the retailer for using the debit card, how's that going to help the customer? How's that going to translate into anything more than profits for the business? Well, Mr. President, in your family background, you've been involved in business. And if you've got a competitor across the street, whether it's a gas station, a drugstore, a grocery store, a restaurant, you know that your price competition is an important part of whether the person chooses your store over the other store. So when you give the owner of the store a break on the fee that's being charged by the credit card companies and banks, then you give them an opportunity to engage in more price competition. Oh, but what about Walmart? This is the monster of retailers in terms of size, about 10% of all the sales in America. I can tell you, even with Walmart, Target's looking over their shoulder. They're watching the prices of goods and deciding whether they can be competitive. So there's competition at this level. And if you give retailers a break when it comes to the amount they have to pay to the banks and credit card companies, I think it's going to end up in consumer benefits. And the consumer organizations, the major ones in this town, support what I've done. They aren't supporting the position of the big banks and credit card companies. Well, one of the arguments that comes down is, it's interesting, the lion's share of the argument against my amendment is not coming from the people directly affected by it. You're not hearing as much in Washington from those big banks on Wall Street or the credit card companies, and they're the ones most affected by it. Why? They don't have much credibility around here. These were the folks that came filing in for a bailout when they made some pretty bad decisions and got billions of dollars from the federal government to bail them out. And then, of course, they turned around and gave bonuses and all sorts of high-level compensation to their officers. So they're not the most popular crowd on Capitol Hill. So they have brought in surrogates to argue their position. And the surrogates, as you know, are the small banks and small credit unions saying the Durbin Amendment is terrible. Well, the first thing you have to say to them, you're exempt. You're not covered by the Durbin Amendment. If you have $10 billion in assets or less, you're not covered. Still, they argue at the end of the day, we think this might hurt us. Well, Mr. President, I've taken an extra step here, beyond the law, to try to deal with some of their concerns, because I value these community banks and credit unions. I worry that they have now become part of the banking industry, in capital letters, instead of what they were traditionally, our neighborhood banks, our small-town banks, our local credit unions. They've now become part of this big banking industry thing. I don't think that's healthy for them. I don't think it's healthy for the economy or for consumers. So what I did was to go to the Merchants Coalition on my side on this issue, the retailers, and ask them to put out a statement of policy when it comes to whether or not they are going to discriminate on the card that is presented. Let me be more specific. If you're running a restaurant in Wheeling, West Virginia, and somebody walks to the door and puts a credit card down, these are all debit cards, puts a debit card down to pay for the meal, will your restaurant take a close look and say, oh, that's a community bank, that's a higher interchange fee than it might be with a card from Chase Bank, for example? And that is one of the concerns expressed by the community banks and credit unions. Even though you exempted us, ultimately these retailers could discriminate against us because our swipe fee is higher than it might be coming out of Chase. Well, Mr. President, we ended up with a letter, an important letter, which I've shared with every one of my colleagues. And it's a letter from the Merchants Payment Coalition, which I ask consent to put in the record at this point.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me just quote a few words from it. This is a letter to me dated May the 2nd. Dear Durbin, we understand that some in the financial services industry are claiming that the Durbin Amendment exemption for interchange swipe fee regulation for financial institutions with assets under $10 billion will not be effective in practice because merchants will discriminate against debit cards with higher fees, higher swipe fees. On behalf of the undersigned trade associations and tens of thousands of merchants and retail locations we represent, we are writing to make clear that we have no contractual or practical ability to treat debit cards issued by small financial institutions or credit unions differently than those issued by large institutions. Furthermore, our member companies are committed to customer service, and it is not in their interest to discriminate against debit cards that so many customers carry. Currently, merchants are subject to Visa and MasterCard network rules that require us to accept all Visa and or MasterCard debit regardless of which bank or credit union issues the card. This is called the Honor All Cards rule, and we risk the threat of $5,000 a day fines or higher if we break this rule. So we assure you that merchants have no intention of violating this term of brand acceptance. These rules also prevent merchants from pricing goods differently based on the financial institution that issued the card. The number one complaint of community banks and credit unions about discrimination against their cards is addressed directly by this letter. And I've made this a part of the record. It's being sent to every member of the United States Senate. There's a second part of this argument. The question is whether or not Visa and MasterCard, the networks, will continue to allow the community banks and credit unions to charge a higher interchange fee than the big banks. Under our law, there's no reason to change it. So I am challenging Visa and MasterCard and these card networks to state clearly and unequivocally, as this letter has stated, that they will not discriminate against these smaller banks, community banks, and credit unions. The merchants have come forward as a matter of record, and it's been put in the congressional record this day, to say there will be no discrimination. At the end of the day, if Visa and MasterCard will make the same promise of no discrimination, then ultimately there is no disadvantage to the community banks and credit unions, none. Now the burden is on the big credit card networks to step up to the plate. I've sent a letter today to the President and CEO of the Illinois Bankers Association, Illinois Credit Union League, and the Community Bankers Association of Illinois, and we're going to send it to their national affiliates as well, sending them a copy of this merchant's letter so that they can no longer make the claim that they're going to be victims of discrimination by merchants and retailers, and asking them to now step up and join us in challenging Visa and MasterCard and the major card networks. That, to me, resolves the most fundamental issue that's been brought to members of the United States Senate. They can no longer claim that these retailers are going to discriminate against them. As a matter of record, they will not. I think it's important for us to change this, and I think it's important for these virtual monopolies of Visa and MasterCard to be held accountable. I think what we've done here in passing this law and giving the Federal Reserve the authority to establish this rule is the right thing to do. Now, there is a big effort afoot to stop us. You know that, Mr. President. They are lobbying like I've never seen before in Capitol Hill. You'd think there's $1 billion a month at stake, and there is. And they are determined to stop the Federal Reserve from issuing a rule which says that retailers and merchants across America will be treated fairly. They're going to stop them if they can, and I'm going to fight them all the way. And I'm hoping that my colleagues who join me in this vote and those who share my feelings about small business across America will stand with me. I know the alternative. The alternative is the largest banks in America and the credit card companies. They've got a lot of friends and they're very powerful. But I think we ought to give the Federal Reserve the chance to issue reasonable final rules. In fact, talk to any bank across the country, and they're going to tell you that the current system is working just fine. They don't want reform. They don't want any change. They want to keep it as is. It is worth billions of dollars to the major banks to keep this charge as it is, at the expense of businesses across America. I favor transparency, and I favor competition, and I wish we didn't have to bring the Federal Reserve into this conversation. but we looked for a neutral regulatory agency that would establish a reasonable and proportional fee, promulgate a rule, issue it after a public comment period, and implement it. And that's what we're striving to do. The CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase, who's a friend of mine, or at least he used to be, Jamie Dimon, has called interchange reform downright idiotic. And he spent a good portion of his recent annual shareholder letter criticizing this reform. Chase has also sent letters to its customers warning about my amendment, and Chase is constantly threatening to raise fees on its customers unless they stop the Durbin Amendment. A few weeks ago, I sent Jamie Dimon a letter and responded to some of his criticisms. I ask unanimous consent that that letter be entered into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I haven't had a reply yet from Mr. Dimon. He called me. I called him back. That seems to be the end of our exchange, but I'd like to hear his response. I encourage him to share my letter with the same shareholders and customers to whom he's written. After all, in his shareholder letter, Mr. Dimon said he wanted, quote, analysis in the full light of day, close quote, of the Durbin Amendment, so I figured he'd want his audience to be informed on my position. I don't think Chase has done that yet. I hope they will. Now, I know that the banking industry prefers for the giant Wall Street banks to stay in the background when it comes to this fight, because they're not that popular. Estimates indicate that about half of all debit swipe fees go to just 10 big banks. And the big three, Bank of America, Chase, and Wells Fargo, make the most of all, well over $1 billion a year each. But the banking industry knows that the public isn't happy with big banks. So the industry is using small banks and credit unions as their public face in this battle. Industry argues that even though my amendment exempts all but the largest 1% of banks from fee regulation, that it just won't work and small banks are going to get hurt. Well, this letter makes it clear that when it comes to retailers and merchants, there will not be any pain inflicted. They are in fact exempt under the law. They will be exempt in practice. I received a letter from 20 of the nation's largest retail associations that reaffirms what I just said. I think the letter is compelling. In this letter, these merchant groups make it clear that they don't have the contractual authority, the practical ability, or the economic incentive to discriminate against small bank or credit union debit cards. They point out that Visa and MasterCard contracts impose strong penalties on them even if they tried. Second, they point out that in many, if not most, retail environments, the merchant doesn't have the practical ability to distinguish between a small bank or a large bank card at the point of sale. I had Wendy Chronister, whose family owns chain of gas stations in downstate Illinois, come into my office and talk about this. I've known her mom and dad a long time, and Wendy is running the business and running it well. And she said, Senator, for goodness sakes, when they put the plastic on the counter, we take it. We need the sales. We're not going to sit there and argue with them about who issued the credit card or the debit card. And that just stands to reason. Merchants also point out that they aren't in a position to tell customers to put their debit cards away when they come to a cash register. They'll lose sales and customers if they do it. Finally, the merchants make the observation that most customers only have one debit card. So if you want to make the sale, you're going to take that debit card. Mr. President, what I've tried to do with this letter is to show that my side on this debate, the small businesses, the retail merchants, convenience stores, hotels, restaurants across America, are trying to be reasonable. Had the credit card companies and the major banks been reasonable on this issue, I never would have introduced this amendment. They've refused to bargain with the retailers and merchants. They said it was a take it or leave it. And they did it in the obscurity of lengthy contracts and regulations, which it's almost impossible to work your way through. I think those who are asking for a delay in study of this issue should be called out for what they're asking for. Every month that they delay means that customers and consumers across America will pay over $1 billion more in these fees on debit cards. Money taken away from retailers, taken away from small business, taken away from our economy. When these small businesses have the advantage that they can get under the Durbin Amendment, they're going to be able to be more profitable, expand their businesses, and hire more people. How many times have we heard the speech on the floor here that the key to economic recovery in America is small business? If you really believe that, then you can't vote. You cannot vote for this 2.5-year delay and study of this issue. If you really believe in small business, I think the issue is very clear. I urge my colleagues not to fall for this argument that the banks and card companies are playing. Don't let them delay and derail the swipe fee reform that Main Street American businesses and consumers need so badly. The Senate has already voted to establish a process for implementing interchange reform. We should let that process continue. We should let the Federal Reserve issue their rules, which they're planning to do in just a matter of weeks. And I think at that time we will see that there is a reasonable way to deal with this that doesn't create a disadvantage for community banks and credit unions. Mr. President, I ask that the statement I'm about to make now be put in a separate place in the congressional record.
Without objection.
Mr. President, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the average price of gasoline is $3.96 a gallon nationwide. I have my own special appointed monitor of gasoline prices in the state of Illinois, my wife. And I called her yesterday morning, and she said to me, Senator, it's up to $4.20 a gallon in Springfield. What are you going to do? So she put me on the spot. Since she's my #1 constituent, I said, I'll at least make a speech. And that's what I'm going to do today on the floor of the Senate. In my own home state of Illinois, the price is well over $4 a gallon, not just in Springfield, but statewide. Every time they go to pump, families and small businesses feel that pinch. At the same time, the 5 largest oil companies in the country made $33.9 billion in profit between January and March this year. ExxonMobil earned almost $11 billion in the first 3 months of this year, 69% greater profits this year compared to last year. The high oil and gas prices are forcing many American families to make tough choices about what to forego so they can fill the tank. It gets worse. While operating at substantial profits, oil companies will get an estimated $4 billion this year in federal subsidies. Think about that. These companies making $11 billion in the first 3 months of the year are asking for federal subsidies. We don't have the money to subsidize them. In fact, we have to borrow it. How do you pay for higher gas prices in America? You're going to pay it 3 ways. First, you pay at the pump, sometimes $80 or $90 to fill your tank, even in Maryland. Secondly, you're going to pay when you pay your taxes, because your tax dollars are going back to the oil companies to subsidize their operations. But, Mr. President, you're going to pay a third time. You know why? Because we have to borrow 40 cents for every dollar we spend in America, and we borrow it primarily from China, and we have to pay China back with interest, so your children and your grandchildren are going to pay interest on the money we borrowed to provide a subsidy, a $4 billion annual interest on the money we borrowed to provide a subsidy, a $4 billion annual subsidy to oil companies that are making record-breaking profits. What's wrong with this picture? Is there anybody left in this town who's willing to fight for families and small businesses who are getting nailed with these high gasoline prices? The interesting thing, and I know the senator who was a former congressman from Maryland knows what I'm saying is accurate. There are rites of spring in America. The opening of the baseball season, the Easter egg hunts, Seder dinners for our Jewish friends, and skyrocketing gasoline prices. Every single year, right before the summer vacation season, the oil companies raise gasoline prices at the pump, and politicians line up at microphones like this one and just beat the heck out of the oil companies and talk about how fundamentally unfair it is, and then we replay this movie next year, every year, year after year. And for the oil companies, why do the prices go up? Any excuse will do. This year, it was Libya. Gaddafi's in trouble. We're going to raise prices at the pump by 40 cents, 50 cents, or $1. Well, it turns out Libya is responsible for about 3% of the world's oil supply. And even if there's an interruption of supply from that place, most of their oil goes to Europe. But as I said, any excuse will do when it comes to raising gasoline prices. Next week, we're going to take up a bill that I support that would end these tax subsidies to the big oil companies. Have you seen their advertising? These oil companies, like ExxonMobil, that made $11 billion in the first 3 months of the year, say if we cut their subsidies, they're going to raise gasoline prices even higher. Talk about being at the end of a gun here. Money or your life. The Close the Big Oil Tax Loopholes Act would end the special treatment given to several companies with leases in the Gulf of Mexico. These companies have been allowed to drill and pump oil without paying the federal government for the oil that they extracted. Ending the special treatment and tax breaks we give to oil companies will generate billions of dollars. I suggest, let's take the money that's going to these highly profitable, record-breaking profitable oil companies and put it in to reduce the deficit. How about that for a start? Reduce the amount of money we're borrowing from China so we don't have to pay interest on them. This bill is not intended to punish the oil companies for turning a profit, but it certainly isn't going to reward them with more taxpayers' dollars. It simply asks large, wealthy international companies in an industry that existed for over 100 years to pay their fair share and no longer depend on the government for a handout. Some of these tax breaks started almost 100 years ago. They were created to encourage companies to explore for oil. However, at $113 a barrel, how much more encouragement do these oil companies need? Domestic oil production, incidentally, I hear this all the time from some of the critics, domestic oil production in this country has been increasing consistently since the year 2008. Domestic production was 1.8 billion barrels in 2008. It's 2 billion barrels in 2010. In 2004, about 60% of oil consumption in America was from imports. And imported oil as a percentage of consumption has dropped a little more each year. Last year it dipped to 50%. Still too much, but the amount of imported oil has come down as domestic production has gone up. The United States is currently the third largest oil producer in the world, behind Saudi Arabia and Russia. This is despite the fact that we have less than 2% of the world's total proved oil reserves. Oil production, incidentally, has also been increasing on federal lands and waters since 2008. Some of the critics are saying, you know why gas prices are up? They won't let these oil companies go out and drill in the Gulf of Mexico and other places. Should we be careful about drilling in the Gulf of Mexico? I think so. BP taught us that lesson last year. But having said that, oil production has increased on federal lands and waters since 2008. In the last 2 years, oil production from the federal outer continental shelf has increased by more than a third, 446 million barrels in 2008, over 500 million barrels in 2009, more than 600 million barrels in 2010. Oil production on federal lands increased 5% in 2010 over 2009. But greater domestic production of oil hasn't led to lower gasoline prices. We've got higher gasoline prices. Drill, baby, drill isn't the solution to rising gas prices in the short or long term. The United States consumes 25% of the oil each year that is produced in the world. We have the capacity to produce 2 to 3%. We can't drill our way out of this challenge. Crude oil prices went up in February with the spread of political unrest in the Middle East and North Africa, even though domestic production in the United States was going up too. The oil industry has access to millions of acres of federal land and water, land that they have bought leases on and land that they will not drill on. For them to argue the government's stopping them from drilling, the obvious question is, so what about the land you currently have to drill on? Why aren't you taking that leased land and putting it in production? Out of the 41 million acres under lease across the United States, the oil industry is only using 12 million acres for production. That leaves 29 million acres under lease to oil companies that is not being used today. 38 million offshore acres are currently under lease, but only 6.5 million of them are in active production. The Bureau of Land Management issued over 4,000 drilling permits last year, 4,000 of them, but approximately 2,500 of them still remained unused at the end of the year. So this argument that the requests for permits to drill are stacking up in some bureaucratic office in Washington, and if they just approve them, these oil companies would start drilling more oil and gas prices would come down, isn't the truth. The Bureau of Land Management issued 4,000 drilling permits last year. 2,500 of them went unused. I support measures proposed by my colleagues to force the oil companies to use their leases or lose them. The bill would require non-producing leases to pay an annual fee of $4 an acre. These leases of public lands should be actively used for domestic energy production, not kept idle as we face higher oil prices. Mr. President, let me close by saying that I recently returned from a trip to China, 10 days in China. And China is an enigma. On the one hand, they are the most significant economic partner of the United States because they're our largest creditor. They loan us more money than any other country. And on the other hand, they're our most significant economic competitor, partner and competitor. And that's the relationship. When you go to China, you were struck by the fact that their air pollution is horrible. In every city we visited, I cannot imagine how people live there full time and don't develop serious health problems because of the terrible pollution that they have in their country. But despite the pollution, they are creating an expanding economy. They are building right and left. And what are they focusing on as the #1 area where China wants to dominate the world? Clean energy. In every direction, solar panels and wind turbines and new research on clean energy. I wish I could say the same for the United States, but I'm afraid I can't. We do not have an energy policy. We are still dependent on traditional fuels. We still recognize that those fuels create environmental issues that we have to face, and unfortunately we're not. And we're not acknowledging the fact that if we're not careful, China is going to dominate in the world when it comes to clean energy throughout the course of this century. We need an energy policy in this country, not just to deal with the terrible gas prices we're facing today, but to deal with a future which makes us less dependent on foreign oil. Mr. President, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll of the Senate.
Mr. Akaka.
And as the Senate continues in this quorum call, we're going to take you over to a House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee meeting. The Subcommittee on the Middle East and South Asia will be meeting today looking at some of the political violence and unrest that's been happening over the past 3 or 4 months in the Middle East and Northern Africa. They'll also discuss how the killing of Osama bin Laden could impact U.S. policies towards Middle Eastern countries. Witnesses today include the Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights and Labor, Michael Posner.
All right, well, I'll go with this. Okay, that's all right. We can at least get started. So now that you're here.
Chairman, we need you to be here for the comment panel.
Ed? You got your series of questions. No. Chairman's here. I don't think the time of the whole committee, so it's me.
I rise today to once again touch on a subject that is important to me, and I know very important to the presiding officer. The Commonwealth of Virginia and the great state of Maryland are blessed to have a large number of federal employees. And as the presiding officer knows, this week we celebrate Public Service Recognition Week to honor public servants at all levels of government for their admirable patriotism and contributions to our country. I want to begin by again commending our military intelligence professionals for the coordinated and painstaking work that was responsible for tracking down Osama bin Laden. There are a number of nameless, faceless federal workers who have been investigating his whereabouts for more than a decade. I was proud to be in this chamber with the presiding officer and colleagues from both sides of the aisle when on Tuesday afternoon this body recognized their work. But our military intelligence and intelligence professionals are not the only ones on the front line of keeping our country safe. Today, I rise to honor a resident of Reston, Virginia, Carl Pike, the Assistant Special Agent in charge of the Special Operations Division at the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA. This is Carl and his whole team here that we're honoring. We've all seen reports in recent years detailing the violent and inhumane acts of the Mexican drug cartels that terrorize cities and control a significant percentage of the narcotics flowing into the United States. Mr. Pike is head of a complex multi-agency task force set up to catch many of these violent criminals and disrupt the flow of drugs. Last year, he and his team led the largest strike ever against La Familia, one of the most ruthless Mexican drug cartels and a major trafficker of methamphetamine in the United States. The strike, dubbed Project Coronado, was an operation that spanned 20 states, 50 cities, 2 countries, and multiple federal agencies. Attorney General Eric Holder said the, quote, unprecedented coordinated U.S. law enforcement action was a significant blow to La Familia's supply chain of illegal drugs, weapons, and cash flowing between Mexico and the United States. This strike would not have been possible without Mr. Pike, as so many of his colleagues attest. One DEA special agent in charge said he oversaw the broad interests of the law enforcement community, displayed phenomenal negotiating and planning skills, and facilitated collaboration between agencies and international partners that often had competing interests. In the end, Project Coronado led to the arrest of 1,200 associates of La Familia and the seizure of 1.5 tons of methamphetamine, $32 million in cash, and 400 weapons. It truly was a significant achievement. Carl Pike and his team should be recognized for removing dangerous drugs and criminals off our streets, something for which we can all be grateful. I hope my colleagues will join me in honoring Mr. Pike and his team, as well as all those at the DEA, for their excellence and service to our nation. I was also proud to be part of a group earlier today recognizing a number of federal employees, 9 from the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I know many from the state of Maryland, who were part of a national competition that recognizes quality work of government workers. As we saw this week in broad display of those military intelligence professionals in this most dramatic action against Osama bin Laden, as we see Mr. Pike and his team taking on the drug cartels, and as we see the countless, literally hundreds of thousands of other federal workers who day in and day out, often without recognition, do the job of keeping our government operating and in many ways keeping our country safe. I hope that my colleagues will join in saluting those efforts and again recognize that this week is the Public Service Recognition Week to honor all our public servants. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
The Senator from Mississippi.
Do I understand we are continuing in morning business?
Senator is correct.
Mr. President, on several occasions I've risen to address my colleagues on the topic of Russia and the continuing sad state of the rule of law in the Russian Federation. Today I rise once again to address the latest information regarding the absence of a rule of law framework in Russia's approach to businesses and investors. Specifically, this situation negatively impacts the United States and the entire international community. There have been a number of court decisions around the world related to the Yukos oil issue that highlight Russia's hostility toward investment and business. As my colleagues may be aware, GML, the majority shareholder of the former Yukos oil, previously headed by a businessman and now political prisoner, Mikhail Hodorkovsky, has a $100 billion arbitration claim against the Russian Federation to obtain compensation for the Yukos assets, which were summarily taken between 2003 and 2005. Several recent developments demonstrate yet again that international courts do not recognize Russia's 2003 expropriation of Yukos Oil Company as legitimate, and that former stakeholders of the company may pursue compensation for their assets that were seized improperly and in essence nationalized by the Russian state. Court victories handed to shareholders involved in the dispute indicate that the international legal system will not recognize the validity of Russia's bankruptcy of Yukos. In December 2009, the New York Times detailed one of these victories in which an independent arbitration panel made a jurisdictional ruling that shareholders of the former Yukos Oil Company, GML, had the right to file and pursue an estimated $100 billion in damages from the Russian government. The tribunal determined that Russia, as a signatory, was bound by the Energy Charter Treaty and must adhere to its provisions. This claim now moves to the next stage with a decision expected in October 2013. Regrettably slow, but moving surely. The most recent victory occurred in December of last year and involved a second international arbitration tribunal in Stockholm, which awarded Ross Investco UK, a minority shareholder of Yukos, $3.5 million for the damages resulting from the Russian government's actions. Mr. President, this was the first case in which anyone seriously examined the claims of an individual Yukos shareholder. The panel independently and unanimously concluded the Russian Federation was liable for expropriating Ross Investco's assets. I would stress to you, Mr. President, that this was a unanimous decision, even though the tribunal included a Russian arbitrator. I bring these developments to the attention of my Senate colleagues because I believe they demonstrate a growing movement in the international community that holds Russia accountable for its actions toward investors, and it is a movement the United States should support. Minority shareholders such as Ross Investco are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to shareholders who lost billions that were rightfully theirs as a result of the seizure of Yukos assets. In the United States alone, shareholders were stripped of $6 to $12 billion. Russia's actions toward Yukos remind us that investment in Russia is extremely risky. The international community is taking note of this. Americans are taking note of this. American legislators should take note of this, Mr. President. And recent court decisions indicate the legitimacy of the Russian government's claims over Yukos assets are suspect at best. With these thoughts in mind, I urge my colleagues to continue working to ensure protection and adequate mechanisms for U.S. shareholders and businesses doing business in Russia. And I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President, very much. Mr. President, tomorrow, May 6, will mark the one-year anniversary of the formal moratorium placed on Gulf of Mexico energy production by President Obama and Secretary Salazar. So I wanted to speak on that occasion, the eve of that occasion, particularly as our constituents continue to see the price at the pump go up and up with really no end in sight. And I think those two facts are deeply related, because I think this moratorium, which continues with a de facto moratorium, a permitorium, a permit logjam to this day, is really one of the most poorly thought out, mismanaged, and ill-conceived energy decisions in terms of domestic energy production in our history. Now, the first of these moratoriums in the Gulf, there are actually three different formal moratoriums, was announced on behalf of President Obama by Secretary Salazar, again, 1 year ago tomorrow, May 6, 2010. And it was done, in retrospect, we find out, very hastily and without scientific backing and justification. I say that because after that first moratorium was put down on May 6, 2010, on June 22nd, a federal judge, Judge Martin Feldman of the Eastern District of Louisiana, ruled against this job-crushing moratorium. It banned drilling below 500 feet of water for 6 months, but Judge Feldman put it on hold because he found that under federal law, it had failed to properly weigh a number of factors, including the economic impact it would have on the industry and surrounding communities. And I might add, in a hearing we had in the Senate about the administration decision to place the moratorium in effect, it was shocking to hear administration officials say very directly, no holds barred, that they never considered any economic impact in the decision whatsoever. Now again, this failing to properly weigh the economic impact of the decision has been a chronic problem at some agencies like the EPA. Unfortunately, this administration seems to have brought that same knee-jerk reaction to the Interior Department with the same economic illiteracy. In the Interior Department's infinite wisdom, on July 12th, Secretary Salazar issued a backup second moratorium. The courts struck down the first moratorium on the basis of existing federal law, so he just came and issued a second moratorium on deep-water drilling. This second moratorium would soon be met with resistance and disappointment as coastal Louisiana communities would realize that there was nothing they could do from Interior that seemed to be absolutely hell-bent on adversely impacting their jobs. Now, on October 12th, Secretary Salazar celebrated an illusory victory by lifting that moratorium, and at the time he claimed, quote, "The policy position that we are articulating today is that we are open for business," close quote. That's what the Secretary, Ken Salazar, said last October 12th. Unfortunately, those of us who live in Louisiana and along the Gulf Coast know that that's not true. What he should have said is the policy position that we're articulating today is we're open for business as long as you don't need a permit from the Interior Department, because that second formal moratorium was lifted, but that brought us to the initiation of the third moratorium, not a formal moratorium, but a de facto moratorium a permitorium, a complete permit logjam in this administration and at the Department of Interior. Again, this has been commonly and accurately referred to as a de facto moratorium, sometimes a permitorium, an absolute permit logjam. And Secretary Salazar has perpetuated that, and the director of BUMMR, Michael Bromwich, has perpetuated that. They've repeatedly stated that it doesn't exist, but the facts, the statistics, the numbers make bare that lie. Now, it wouldn't be for 4 more months until February 28th of this year that the Interior Department would issue the very first permit to drill in deep water, an exploratory well. So, again, big celebration, big announcement that the formal moratorium was lifted, but for 4 months, 0 permits, and only 4 months later, the first deepwater exploratory permit. To date, even since February 28th of this year, there have only been 12 deepwater permits issued in the Gulf. Now, that pace is well below the pace that was the norm before the BP disaster. It's about 60% slower than the pre-spill pace. And this is for shallow and deep water combined. The pace of only deep water new well permits, permits that would actually increase domestic supply and our reserves, are forthcoming at the average pace of 1 per month, just a trickle, just a tiny percentage of the pre-disaster pace. So tomorrow is 1 year since the Obama administration implemented this moratorium policy, the first of 3 crushing moratoriums, 2 formal moratoriums, the ongoing de facto moratorium. The Energy Information Administration, and that's a nonpartisan division of the Department of Energy, is now estimating that the fall-off in domestic production this year alone will be about 200,000 barrels per day. It's a lot of oil, 200,000 barrels per day. And an additional 200,000 barrels per day in 2012. To put this fall-off in production that's expected from the Obama administration's policy in perspective, as a result of the permitting logjam, by 2012 we would lose as much production in the Gulf of Mexico as we currently import from Brazil and Colombia combined. These are the 2 countries, by the way, where we've supported with taxpayer-funded guarantees projects related to their energy production. So this fall off in production in the Gulf by 2012 is roughly equivalent also to what we imported in January from Iraq. Now, there are several things I'd like to highlight for tomorrow's anniversary of the initiation of this moratorium policy. First, the price of gasoline at the pump is now $3.98 a gallon. It's more than doubled since President Obama took office. And there's perhaps not a greater anti-stimulus for our economy than that doubling of the price at the pump. Second, 7 deepwater rigs have left the Gulf of Mexico. They're gone, and they're not coming back anytime soon. And in addition, 5 are cold stacked or without a contract. That's a total of 12 rigs. Ironically, that's exactly the same number of deepwater permits that the Interior Department has issued, a trickle compared to pre-BP levels. Number 3, what minor credit I should give the Interior Department for this abysmal pace of permitting will be noted when I release my hold on the nomination of Dan Ash. I'm currently holding that nomination of a top-level Interior Department official, and I said I would hold it until we got at least 15 deepwater exploratory permits. At the time I initiated that, there were 0. As I said, that's now finally up to 12. I said I would lift the hold when we get to 15. We're just 3 away, and so we'll get there. I'll lift the hold, but that is merely a trickle of what our pace needs to be. Fourth, today I'll be introducing an important piece of legislation. It's called the Agency Overreach Moratorium Act. We need a moratorium. We need a moratorium on regulatory overreach, agency overreach, as we see in Interior Department, in EPA, in many other agencies. So this legislation is intended to prevent federal action that would unilaterally destroy jobs on federal lands on the OCS. That is happening every day at the Interior Department. Instead of issuing permits to find American energy, they're issuing regulations, the most recent on a whole new category of contractors, completely unnecessary because they were already regulating the drillers, and that is regulatory overreach, and that is job-killing action. My agency overreach moratorium act will lay out the real moratorium we need on job-killing action out of Washington, out of this administration, not on domestic energy production. Mr. President, I want to thank all my colleagues, and I hope we'll all come together soon around a common-sense, proactive domestic energy policy. It needs to include a lot of things. I'm a fervent believer in all of the above, but it certainly needs to start on lifting the continuing de facto moratorium on U.S. energy production, on U.S. jobs, on good additional federal revenue to the U.S. Treasury to lower our deficit if we're going to get on the right energy path. Thank you, Mr. President, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call